morning, parents. Welcome to the second part of God's good design for women. Our passage is Titus chapter 2. I'm going to read there again for us. It's Titus chapter 2, starting in verse 3, and it says, "Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled." First, I just wanted to start by saying a couple things on this idea of mentorship, older women to younger women. Their primary task, of course, that it says here is to teach them to love their husbands and their children. So I just wanted to start by talking about the idea of, well, how do you go about finding a younger woman to instruct, or how does a younger woman go about finding an older woman to receive instruction from? Just a couple practical suggestions, and I'm sure you know how to do it yourselves, but just a thought is for the older woman when thinking about how do I go about trying to mentor a younger woman. What I would suggest and encourage is just going to a younger woman that you know or one that you've been observing, and to ask them if you can partner in prayer with them. I think for any young Christian woman, the idea of somebody, and especially an older woman, partnering in prayer with them about the things that are going on in their lives and in their homes, with their husbands and with their children, I think that would be a deep encouragement for them. So the relationship of mentorship might really be birthed through that partnership and prayer aspect. Also then for younger women who are just seeking an older woman to mentor them, I think about just them observing and seeing a woman that is godly, that's a godly example, someone that they respect, and then going and seeking them and asking them if they might play a mentorship role within their life. And it might just start simply with partnering in prayer with you. Those are just a couple of suggestions for older women and younger women. And one other thing to kind of keep in mind when we think about this idea of mentorship, I think it's important to understand that there's always an older woman than you, and there's always a younger woman than you. And so it doesn't really matter how old you are. We can always be mentored, and we can always really be mentoring someone. And I think this is even important for younger women who, just only think of themselves as younger women needing to be mentored. So for example, you might have like a woman in her young 20s. She has a husband and a few kids or something along those lines. And there's also younger women than her. Maybe there's some younger single women than her. I think that it's important for her to be an example and a model and a mentor for those younger women. And so no matter what age the woman is, there's always someone older, there's always someone younger, and we can hopefully have a thriving Christian community of mentorship that is taking place through all age groups, basically. Now we're going to get to where we get to the content of that mentorship. So what is the content of our mentorship? Well, he says here in Titus to teach what is good. And we said the primary good thing to teach a younger woman to do is to love her husband and to love her children. And then he gets more specific in verse 5. He says to be self-controlled, teach them to be self-controlled. And we can ask ourselves the question, well, is it ever necessary for a woman to have self-control when loving her husband and loving her children? Well, the obvious answer is yes, she's going to need to exercise some self-control at that time. Well, we could ask the question, is a woman's patience ever going to be tried when she is seeking to love her husband and to love her children? Absolutely. And that's when self-control really comes in. And in this passage, self-control is really kind of the primary virtue that keeps and maintains the love of the husband and of the children. And then self-control is the primary virtue that makes the other ones possible as well. So for example, the ones that follow. The second virtue or encouragement is that the younger woman would be pure. Pure, primarily talking about sexual faithfulness. So she's going to need self-control in her purity to not lust after other men, and not just thinking of it in terms of adultery, only the physical act, but this would apply to the life of the mind and fantasies that women can have. Right? The Bible is calling for a purity It's discouraging away from the idea of romance novels and all the fantasies that could run through a woman's mind, imagining herself married to another man and what that would be like. No, there's a call for self-control and purity, marital faithfulness for the younger woman. And this is a challenge, and so this is why it needs to be trained and encouraged and taught. And then the older woman also teaches the working at home. And so what this is communicating is that the primary responsibility of the management of the home, it falls to the wife. Doesn't mean, of course, that the husband is not involved. Doesn't mean that the wife could never leave the home or maybe even work outside the home. Proverbs 31 seems to indicate that there's a woman who sees a field, consider it, and she goes out and she buys it. She is also a provider for the home as well. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that she would never work outside the home, but it does, of course, say she will work at the home and she will manage the home. We could easily understand and recognize how a chaotic home, a mess inside the home is going to cause marital friction, not just between the husband, also with the children, and there'll just be there won't be a peaceful atmosphere within the home. So what has to be asked honestly to a husband and a wife as they're thinking about this, they want to obviously operate with wisdom, and they want to ask, well, is the primary duty being neglected or hindered due to a secondary reason, like working outside the home? And what needs to be made sure of is that, okay, the primary duty is always being managed well and taken care of. And maybe some secondary things are done and practiced. Maybe the wife's working with the husband or working outside the home in some kind of way. But the home is not being neglected because of it. And so there's this encouragement by the Apostle Paul for the older women to teach the younger women to work at home. And when this is actually done, it's also loving the husband and loving the children. It's really all under that rubric there. And then it says to teach them to be kind. This is talking about being generous or sympathetic, warm-hearted. The wife, of course, doesn't want the reputation of being mean. The mom is mean is not really the reputation that is being sought here. And so we can understand then how a husband who's also exercising godly fatherhood and being generous and sympathetic and warm-hearted himself is going to help influence what's taking place in the home. And then finally, that they would be submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God would not be reviled. So not submissive to any man, but submissive to their own husband, that the word of God would not be reviled, so that non-believers would not say, man, you see how these Christian women are treating their husbands, and then reviling them for the poor treatment that's taking place. And so what's interesting there is that there's actually just a natural sense in that this is supposed to happen, that even a non-believer could recognize it as out of order if these things aren't happening, and primarily submission to their own husbands. And so this is the good that the older woman is to teach to the younger woman. This is how they teach them to love their husbands and to love their children. Well, anyway, I hope this helps you this week, and I look forward to talking about men next week. All right, God bless.